Look at that, I'm shaking so bad I can't put my pin number in my phone. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pray. Father God, I just thank you that I get to be here. I thank you that you have chosen me to be your mouthpiece tonight for something that is near and dear to my heart. I thank you for all the moments in my life that have brought me to this point, Father God. And I just ask, I thank you that you're going to use it to touch somebody and to encourage somebody tonight. In Jesus' name. All right. So it looks like I have a lot. See, but I'm blind, so it has to be big. I didn't have a title for tonight until I was asked what it was. So we're going to call it The Weight of Waiting. Okay. Jeremiah 29:11, we all know it really, really well. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future." And tonight I get to tell you a story. A story about a 9-year-old girl who heard from the Lord his plan for her life. He first started revealing his plan for me as a little girl who fell in love with the world outside of her own. Mission Sunday was always my favorite. I loved bringing my buddy barrel to church, proudly filled with my coins that I had saved up for the month, so that I could do my part to help support the people that leave their home and go around the world and be the hands and feet of Jesus. I loved seeing Winnie the World and listening to her tales about places far across the world. I met my first missionary family that went to Africa and came home with a little baby African boy. I don't remember their names. Their last name was Todd. His name was Lapombo. He's not so little anymore. I remember days dreaming that someday I would go around the world and bring a child home with me. During VBS that year, we sang a song saying, "Please don't send me to Africa. I'll go anywhere but there." And I proudly marched up to Anita and I announced, "I'll go to Africa. I ain't scared of no bugs, no dirt, no snakes." Guess what? I'm really afraid of bugs and dirt and snakes. Little did I know all those years ago that God was tugging at my heart. He was sharing his plans for my life. He instilled in me a wanderlust spirit, a desire for the far off, the exotic. Always a passion for different cultures and foods and customs and dress. It wasn't until a decade later during a prayer meeting at a Bible camp that he revealed more of his plan to me. When he gave me a vision of myself sitting under a large shade tree. It had a tall trunk with branches that were about 8 feet up, and it protected me from the sun's harsh rays. I was sitting crisscross applesauce, surrounded by women and children of color. I knew then, I realized that my years of obsession with travel and culture was not just a little girl's daydream of seeing the world, but a passion to pursue what God had called me for in this life. I didn't always remember the call. For about a decade, I did my own thing, running far from the Lord. I had failed relationship after failed relationship, losing my first child in a nasty custody battle that resulted in 12 years of no contact with her. Drinking my life away, angry, bitter, depressed, and suicidal. Until one day I found myself single and pregnant at 25, living on my own for the first time in my life. And I remembered I had told the Lord that if he gave me another chance to be a mom, I would do it right. I would raise the baby to know him. I started going back to church in 2007, some 12 years or so of avoiding God. And slowly my relationship with the Lord grew and deepened. In 2012, 2013, I went through medical stuff, and the results were not favorable. The doctors gave me a laundry list of diagnoses that told me that even with heavy-duty drugs and outpatient counseling, I would never be a functioning member of society because my anxiety and depression was so bad. And my physical health was expected to deteriorate so quickly that I would be bound to a wheelchair by the time I was 40. I'll be 45 next year, there's no wheelchair. For a couple of years, my church had toyed with the idea of taking a mission trip, but they didn't know where or when while, one of our visiting missionaries recognized my passion and told me about a team that was looking for a couple of extra people to join them for 11 days in Thailand. I immediately applied and started seeking fundraising opportunities. But I had nobody walking me through it, nobody in my corner who had been on a short-term trip that could help advise me in this process. And soon, I learned that the trip was being canceled due to the lack of funds. I was crushed. Shortly after that, the same missionaries from Thailand invited our church to create our own team and come and serve. And our leadership down there, they were kind of tossing the idea back and forth, and they weren't ready to commit. They didn't know, they weren't comfortable, they didn't, like, how do you start? Until me, in all my obnoxiousness, stomped my foot and said, no, we're gonna do it. I said, we've spent years pouring money and prayer into missions. We bring in missionaries all the time. It's our passion. This is the heart for this church. It just seems like the logical next step to go, to learn how to go, to learn how to help others go, to train teams and identify people that have the call and the passion and help them on their path. So, off to Thailand we went. 2017 was a whirlwind. We worked hard to raise funds and awareness. We spoke with everybody that we could to tell them that we were going. Town was abuzz about the church that was sending a team to Thailand. I don't know if any other Tenasket church had sent a team somewhere so far before, because everybody at the junction was talking about it, everybody. In June, we were off. A 7-hour drive and I don't remember if it was 22 or 26 hours worth of flights. And I was taking my first steps to realizing my call to missions. I remember the sign on the office when we got there, having our little, welcome meeting with the missionaries. And the sign said, welcome, you are now missionaries. I remember eating lunch on our third day there, and we were on a balcony that was overlooking the Mekong River. And I just burst into tears, realizing that the weight of everything I had done, and God still sent me. I did everything I could to thwart his plans and to do my own thing, and he still brought me back, and he still sent me. I can't tell you a whole lot about that trip other than how much I missed my 9-year-old, how swollen my feet and ankles got, and the fact that I ate a cricket. Look at that. I'm afraid of dirt and bugs, but I'll eat a cricket. What I can tell you is this. I was hooked. There was no going back for me. I've had a taste of travel and missions, of worship services in 2 different countries and languages. That is powerful. That is something that will rip your heart right from your chest. There was no way on this earth that this was going to be a one-and-done trip. I came back to the States after 15 days gone and immediately got to work. How did I get to do this full-time? I had to figure it out. I started talking to everyone I could. I reached out to the district missions mobilizers. It's a fancy word for people who are in charge of sending missionaries. And pastors who had people that were going, sending pastors. And guess what I learned? I didn't have what it took. Through the denomination I was in, you had to be a licensed pastor, or you had to have a degree in theology, neither of which I had. But I didn't let that stop me. One closed door does not mean it's a no-go. Keep going, keep knocking. I started looking into other denominations that I knew to be scripturally sound and started reaching out to their missions departments. Everywhere I turned, there was more red tape, more brick walls, more no. I couldn't get a single yes on anything. I was feeling kind of discouraged. I reached out to the Assembly of God missions and got the harshest rejection ever. I was told flat out that there was no place for a tattooed, unwed mother and her fatherless child on the mission field. I couldn't get any respect. I couldn't expect to get any respect or honor from the people I was going to serve. Because who can trust somebody with that kind of sordid past or, the perceived hypocrisy? Well, I was a low blow. I was pretty ticked off. I was hurt. I was indignant. How dare they? How dare they? They don't know my story. They knew a paragraph in an email that I had sent them, just trying to introduce myself. Besides that, how do you expect to teach grace and the love of Jesus if you can't show it?
Come on.
Just a few short weeks after that, my pastor had sent me to a missions camp out. Long-term missionaries, short-term missionaries, people who were just interested in missions were all gathered in one place, sharing their stories and their passions and all the things. I think of, kids camp, but for grown-ups, I was still angry. This was just a few weeks after that rejection. The wound was so fresh and deep. I made a fool out of myself because as soon as I met my cabin mates and they asked me oh, where are you going? Where are you a missionary? I lost it. I became a blubbering idiot. I was sobbing in their arms. I don't know these girls. They gathered around me and they hugged me and they prayed with me and they said, we don't know how, but this is not the end. I remember speaking with a lady who was running the camp, years of experience under her belt serving in the Dominican Republic, asking her, what do I do? How is somebody supposed to keep pressing forward when the uppity-ups are telling you no, that you can't, that you just can't, you're not worth it, you don't have what it takes. I know that God has placed His call in my life, but I'm a single mom, nothing's going to change that. I can't afford the education required, and everything is just hopeless. What do I do? And Kirsten said 3 words that will forever be seared into my memory. She said, every open door. I said, Kirsten, what does that mean? What is that supposed to mean? And she says, you don't know where you're going. You don't know how you're getting there. You're being told no everywhere you go. And yet you know, and I believe, that you are personally called and set apart for this. So until God starts making that way clear to you, you walk through every open door. You serve in any missions capacity that comes available to you, be it a mission leader at your church, serving on a short-term trip, or helping raise somebody else's funds for their trip. You do everything you can to remain in this missions world, and you walk through every open door. Wow. That was pretty big. Her and I prayed, and I committed to this plan of every open door. A few hours later, our first session started. I was still upset from my good cry with the ladies earlier, and I wasn't much interested in receiving what the speakers were saying, until I heard that they mentioned that they were in Norway for years. And this perked me up, because Austin's not here. Austin's great-great-grandfather came from Norway. And so it just was something that was interesting, and it actually perked me up. I can't remember what they said, what they talked about, but when they got done talking, this tall, lanky, goofy guy jumps off the stage, and he hands me a slip of paper, and he says, we're going to Mexico next April, and you're going to go with us. And I laughed at him. I was so rude. I was like, dude, I don't think so. He was like, no, you should go. Like, seriously, it's a thing. You're going to go. And I was like, yeah, And this single mom's going to take her kid, right? Because, that's the perfect place for us. I was rude. He wasn't bothered. He wasn't bothered at all. He just looks at me and he says, actually, it's the best trip in the world for a family. I laughed again and said, yeah, thanks for the invite, but I don't see it happening. Something wouldn't settle. I couldn't shake how willing he was to lead a single mom in the missions world that she was just told was not a place for her. And I couldn't forget Kirsten's words, every open door. Funny how it happened just a couple of hours later. I spent that evening reflecting, half praying, half wondering, what do I do? who is this kook? The next morning I looked for him at breakfast. I didn't see him. I looked for him at first session. I still didn't see him. But at free time, before lunch, I found him. And I approached him cautiously. I was like, hey, so, you know you were talking about Mexico, right? He's like, yeah. And I said, well, were you serious? And he's like, yeah, go. Like, I think you should go. It'll be great. And I'm like, well, okay, but this is what I'm dealing with. This is what I'm being told. You know, I'm a single mom. I'm not worth it. Too difficult, too much baggage. He's like, hogwash. Absolutely no way. He says the world of missions is changing, and you can be a short-term worker and be gone in the field all the time. All the churches, all the ministries, all the countries, they all have different needs. They're changing all the time, and there's always places that need filled. And there's no doubt in my mind that you will be on this trip in April. I told him I had baby daddy drama. My ex isn't a believer, and he's kind of against the church. I couldn't see him signing off to let me take his kid out of the country. We prayed together for open doors, and we committed to continue to pray throughout the summer. He asked me to keep him updated. I don't think I even had his phone number. I came home with a renewed hope. I was still hanging on by a thread, but there was a glimmer of hope. I reached out to Austin's dad, and he completely ignored me. It was April. I tried to broach the subject with him a few times that spring and summer. Every time he left me on red, and when he would talk about anything else, would not respond to that. Stampede weekend, Austin's grandma came to pick him up. And he was telling her, hey, I want to do this thing, I've got this opportunity, and my dad's not talking to us. And she says, you know what, Austin, we're going to talk to your dad together. And sure enough, they came home from the weekend, and Austin's grandma says, we talked to him, and he says there's no way he's holding his son back. So he's going to sign whatever papers you need. Every open door. We were going to Mexico. A couple weeks later, I was sent to Yakima for a disaster relief training. Okay, I'm going to brag. Do you guys know that I'm FEMA certified to be at ground zero in a disaster? Yeah. People in crisis kind of have my heart. And so it seemed, a good thing, a fitting thing to go down to the disaster relief training. Who should I see the training? None other than Mr. Scott Burkford. That's the man who invited me to Mexico a few months earlier and promised to pray with me that God would open the heart of Austin's father. I had some news for him. So we took our first trip to serve the pastors and their families in April of 2019, and I never looked back. We were immediately welcomed into the folds of the Mexico ministry family. We have been absorbed into the sending church in Lakewood, and we feel like it's our home away from home. I should probably tell you who this Scott guy is, because he's kind of important in the story. Scott and his wife, Pat, live in Olympia. They started serving in Mexico way back in the early 80s, like when I was still in diapers. He started just doing what he knew. He went down and he did construction work. He helped build churches, rehab the orphanages, built a rehab center. But he knew that that's not why he was actually there. There was something missing. He ended up getting to meet the president of the Foursquare Church in Mexico. And as they talked that evening and got to know each other, Scott learned about the brokenness among the pastors. There's no family among the churches. The church on this side of town doesn't even know that the church on this side of town exists, let alone do they communicate or work together. They all feel like an island. There was no relationship. The pastors were real people. They had struggles, addiction and brokenness, anger, dwindling faith, marital problems, anything you can think of, anything that you and I go through. Together, these men worked up a plan, and the next year the retreats were born. They started out with about 8 pastors. And then the following year, they had over 50. And within 5 years, they were serving over 150, 250 pastors. They had over 500 people in attendance, and they were taking teams of 100 plus down. It got too big. So, to put it simply, Scott is actually the founder of the ministry that I work with in Mexico. Scott is also very familiar with the Okanagan County, as his brother-in-law used to be the youth pastor in the Tonasket Foursquare in the 90s. He became friends with Pastor Raul, who we all know as the pastor of the Tonasket Assembly of God. And Raul has been on a couple of the trips to Mexico with Scott. Anyway, in 2019, I became part of the Foursquare Mexico family, and I knew I was going back. The quiet power of working in the background to support pastors and help strengthen the foundations of the church in Mexico. The testimonies that the older members, and now myself, have of our times and the fruit from our ministry is crazy. 2020 hit and travel was banned. We waited 2 long years to go back. But when we did, it was as though we never left. We were remembered by team members as well as the pastors and leaders we went down to serve. Back home, I started talking to my pastor about opening the trip to other church members. Maybe others wanted to go. Maybe others wanted to see what it was like to leave your home, to experience another culture, to be the hands and feet of Jesus outside of the Okanagan County. He told me no. After the trip that we went on to Thailand, he didn't want another mission trip unless there was real, measurable, tangible work being done. If we aren't building, his words were, if we aren't building churches or digging wells, it's not going to be a church trip. He says, so what you're saying is that because I have no marketable skills, there's no place for me on the field? He looked at me and said, well, yeah, I guess so. Would you look at that? Rejected again. And this time by somebody who knows me and has a relationship with me. Someone I trust and I love. And even he tells me I have no value in the world of missions. Ouch. Every open door. As long as I was invited to Mexico, I was going. Until God set my feet on a different path, I would go. Within the ministry in Mexico, I felt like I had found my people. They know me and they love me. The good, the bad, the ugly. There's kind of a different side of people you get to meet when you're traveling around the world. People get tired, they get cranky, they get sick of tacos. Did you know that's a thing? You can get sick of tacos? Yeah, it really is a thing. But you see people when they're just not on their best behavior. They're not at their best. And these guys, they strengthen me. They encourage me. They push me and hold me accountable. And soon I realized they had become my home. I have friends in Mexico, not just people on my Facebook, but friends, people I talk to on a regular basis, who also encourage me and strengthen me and call me out on my crud, because there's a lot of it. Friends who remember my special days and upcoming events. Friends who pray with me and for me as I do them. In 2022, everything was finally lining up. My tenacity and perseverance was showing fruit. My pastor and I decided that it was time to seek my credentials for me to become a pastor. Many things in the world of missions require that title. I can't create a disaster relief team if I'm not a chaplain. Being a chaplain requires being a legal/licensed pastor. And now the time has finally come. In the new year, the process gets to start. In October, I was coming home from a leadership conference in Spokane, riding that camp high that so often happens at conferences that we feel encouraged. And within 24 hours, everything changed. An accusation came out of some pretty horrible things against my family. And these accusations, or how they were handled, cost us everything. We lost our home. We lost my career. And we found ourselves without a church. We waited a few months for reconciliation, and we realized it was never going to happen. We had to move on. I was so afraid. I was afraid of the accusations and what it would mean for us in the long term. I was afraid of financial ruin, of being without a church family. I was afraid of the lies and the gossip. I mean, we live in a small town. I didn't know how to not be part of my church and part of my denomination. I didn't know what this would mean for me in the world of the ministry in Mexico. I didn't know what to do or how to protect my family in this season. I thought about moving to Lakewood, our home away from home. I knew that we would be safe there. They would take care of us. And I'd be able to remain in the Foursquare Church. But I wasn't sure that was the right move either. So at the risk of losing what little I had left, my extended Foursquare family and my ministry, I chose to stay in the Okanagan. We came back up here to VCF, and we found a house, and I got a job. And we started settling into the new norm. Learning to lean on the Lord for all of our needs, from safety and protection to provision and hope. Because aside from my family, what did I have left but my faith? I remained a part of the Mexico ministry. They knew me better than to believe any of the lies. And my core team has walked closely with me these last few years to encourage me, to pray with me, to train, to grow, and to love on us. I have even become part of the leadership within the ministry. Since coming to VCF, we have talked a great deal about doing more in other places, looking for opportunities to connect with other missionaries and ministries overseas. As yet, we have not found the place that God has for us corporately to focus on. Working on it. Even in this process, I've been faced with negativity, questions against my call, my abilities, rejection, all causing self-doubt again and again and again. Maybe these short-term trips is all the Lord has for me. Maybe it's time to focus on identifying and raising up and training future missionaries. You know the old saying, those who can't do, teach? Yeah. Over the years, people would ask me, if you're called, where are you called to? And I never really found an answer for that. Always just said, God hasn't revealed it to me yet. I don't know if I'll be in one place or if I'll be all over the place. But I do know that when I get there, I'll be home. I'll be so in love with the place, with the food, with the people, with the culture and the atmosphere. And I'll fall madly in love. That's how I'll know that I have found my place. A couple of months ago, I was in a meeting and I was asked, what would it take for you to slow down? To quit going to Mexico 2, 3, 4 times a year? The question shook me. I hadn't thought about it, for one. For two, I was I don't know if I was really mad. Mad wouldn't necessarily be the right word, but I was a bit indignant. It caught me off guard, and I didn't know how to politely respond. I had to answer the only way I knew how. And that was honestly and with conviction. I stated the only thing that will keep me from going to Mexico is an act of God. Please don't think I'm being disrespectful, but I answered God first. And until God removes me from the ministry in Mexico, I will not slow down or stop. I will be happy to stay here and continue to work in finding the place that God has for VCF. But it's not going to stop me from going to Mexico. It's not one or the other, it's both. I was shaking so bad when I had to respond to that question. And I tend to have a reputation for being really rebellious. And I wanted my heart to be heard. I didn't want it to be about, you can't tell me what to do. I wanted my heart to be heard. Did I answer correctly? There's not a doubt in my mind that for me personally, in this season, God has me in Mexico. That may not fit what other people think is worthy, but until God removes me, I'll remain. I was so scared that I would be received, that what would be received was not my conviction, but rebellion. But it was a stand I felt like I had to take. To my surprise, the response I received wasn't one of frustration or animosity, but one of grace and understanding and respect. So, why is all this so important? Where am I going with this story? Well, there's more to the story than meets the eye. This is a story of waiting. Sometimes the Lord asks us to wait, but why? What's the purpose of waiting? A season of waiting can be short, a few months. It can be a long wait. For me, it's been 35 years and counting, waiting for the time that God releases me to fully walk in the call that He has for me. We don't get to know how long we have to wait. We just wait. But what is the wait? I've always heard about embracing the season of waiting and seeing it as a blessing and not a hindrance. But how is waiting 35 years supposed to be a blessing? Jeremiah 29 goes on to say in verses 12 and 13, "Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with your whole heart." A season of wait, no matter how long or short that it may be, is not a time to sit idle. It doesn't actually mean sit down and wait. To just assume that someday the floodgates are going to open and you're going to miraculously have and know all that you need in order to walk in the promise that He has given to you. No. It's the season is a time for action. It's an open invitation to draw to Him, to allow Him to teach us and mold us. There are things that we must learn, tools to be equipped before we can step into the new season. The lessons that I needed to learn are going to be different than the ones that you might need to learn to be equipped for your promise to be fulfilled. Don't get me wrong, this isn't, I got some stuff for you to learn. Like that's not His heart. His heart is, here, let me show you. Because He knows what you're going to need for that future. Way more than I ever knew. One of the biggest lessons that I had to learn was to seek His truth. I had to learn to hear His voice. Not only to hear Him, but to seek out answers from Him. I had to stop thinking that if He had something to say to me, He would just say it. I had to start asking the questions. Jeremiah 33:3, that's what my bracelet says. It says, "Call to me, and I will answer you until you create an unsearchable things." I had to learn to ask Him for those unsearchable things. I had to ask Him for the truth when the world kept rejecting me. What is your truth? What do you say? I had to experience the great loss of my dad in order to come to the understanding that as Psalm 34:18 says, He's near to the brokenhearted, and He saves those who are crushed in spirit. I had to allow Him to be my comfort when comfort couldn't be found. When the accusations came, I had to learn to let Him fight for me, like Exodus 14:14 says. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. I'm not a sitter, I'm a fighter. So that's a hard one for me because I want to get up, I want to make it all right. I didn't have to stick up for myself. I didn't have to fight the fight. That was in His hands. In the same season, I was learning the true meaning of allowing Him to be my Jehovah Jireh, my provider. I had to trust Him for all provision, financial, faith, protection. I've never been in a situation where I had literally no control over anything in my life, and I had to learn to trust in His goodness to carry us through. I had to learn my identity in Him. Not who the world says I am, not who I feel like I am, not who my mom says I am, who He says I am. That everything I was always told was wrong with me was exactly who He created me to be. Sure, I'm loud, I'm opinionated, I'm obnoxious, I'm not always the one you want on speakerphone. But that's what he created. He created me to be passionate, to be bold. And he's been working to soften up my rough edges, for sure. It's not always easy. But the flip side of that boldness and that opinionated attitude is that the passion goes both ways. I'm also extremely loyal, compassionate, empathetic. I had to learn again to ask his truth regarding my health. What does he say my diagnosis is? Because obviously it wasn't to be in a wheelchair by the time I was 40. I had to learn to stand on the faith that the doctors were wrong. The wait isn't all about the lessons and the learning, though. Also in the wait is him working, knitting things together, connecting the pieces that we may never fully comprehend. As Romans 8:28 says, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Okay, cool. So he's working, but 35 years. Okay, so then Ephesians 1:10 says, to be put into effect when the time reaches their fulfillment, to bring unity to all things in heaven and under the earth, under Christ. All these years of waiting, he's been piecing together my past in order to create my future. Remember how I said in the early 90s, that Scott guy, his brother-in-law, was a youth pastor in Tonasket? Well, at the same time, during those same years, is when God was speaking to that little girl in Tonasket at the Assembly of God Church. That's when God was planting the seed into that little girl's heart, knowing that someday, decades later, her and Scott would meet and he would take her to Mexico. Just before my last trip, I had the honor to speak at the Assembly of God in Tonasket, Pastor Raul's church. It was such an intense, full circle moment for me that I would be in the exact building where it all started, speaking to the very people who come from the nation that holds my heart about what an honor it is to be serving their brothers and sisters back home. How much it blesses me that their people have welcomed me so warmly and made me feel more at home than I have ever felt anywhere else I've ever been. Tell me that's not the sovereignty of God. Nobody on this planet is ever going to tell me that God didn't plan that out purposefully and perfectly in order to not only encourage me, but to encourage people who hear my story. He's working, even when we don't see it. 35 years ago, random people, he's working. The final bit of my story that I wanted to share with you this evening is that the wait ends. It will end. In April, when Emma and I went to Rosarito, we got to spend a weekend with our friends, Scott and January Wilson. Different Scott. Confuses mom all the time. They've been missionaries in the Baja for 10 years this fall. I can't remember Scott's official title, but he's in charge of incoming teams, and he helps plan and facilitate their trips. He helps get them from point A to point B, picks them up, brings them across the border, gets them to all the places, helps them find projects to work on even. But he's also working as an assistant regional missions director for Central America and Caribbean region for the Foursquare. So it's like, I don't know, Central America, Mexico, and Guatemala, and whatever, and then over in the Caribbean and Jamaica and all that. As well, he assists with the Foursquare Global Council, which is the group that are over all things Foursquare for the whole world. Not just missions, but all things. They control the church, but the International Foursquare Church. I had no clue about all he does. I didn't know he was so hoity-toity until I got there that weekend and he started telling me about it all. One evening, when I was at their house, we started talking. And Scott says, tell me about Mexico. I'm like, Scott, I'm confused. You have lived down here for 10 years and you're asking me about Mexico? And he says, no, Tell me about Mexico as it pertains to you. I said, Scott, I don't really understand that question. What is Mexico to me? Mexico's home. I can't explain it, but as soon as I get off the plane, peace just washes over me. The sights, the sounds, the smells, some of the smells are not fun, but they all comfort me, they bring me comfort. I feel like I'm home. As soon as I get off the plane, I feel like I'm home. When I get back here, within a week, I'm homesick. I'm ready to go back. I start feeling depressed. And I'm just holding on for a few months until my next trip. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's all I've got. That's what Mexico is for me. He looked at me for just a second. With a look I still can't identify. And he sat quietly, maybe for a minute, and he said, because this is your home. He says, that wasn't you, that was the Holy Spirit talking. He says, you're called here. It's as simple as that. Oh, Scott, if you only knew how much I wanted to be here. But I can't. I'm not a pastor, and I'm not a Foursquare, and all these things. And we weighed the options. Come down on a work visa or as a religious worker and be received by the Foursquare Church. He said that Chella, who's the Foursquare president, has been asking him for 2.5 years to find an assistant. I'm gone more and more every year, and when I'm gone, work stops here. She wants me to find a helper that can keep things going while I'm gone. 2.5 years I've been looking and praying, but I just can't find anyone. I've not been able to find someone I trust with my ministry, whose passion and love for Mexico matches mine, someone I like well enough to work closely with, someone that can handle my wife. You'd have to know January to get that one. 2.5 years I've been unable to find someone. Amber, that someone is you. I want you to come down here and help. We know you're called. We know that you have the heart. You have the skill for bringing people into the folds, for loving the unlovable. We need you, and I'm going to be working on getting you down here if that's something that you're willing to do. So while we were at camp, Scott called a special meeting with Chella, and he's like, I found my helper that you've been nagging me to get, but she's not Foursquare. Chella says, I don't want her. And he's like, no, you want her. You believe me, you want her. And Chella's like, no, she has to be Foursquare. And he's like, no, you want her, you know her, you know her. And she kept asking, who is it, who is it, who is it? I think he was playing with her head. And he finally told her who it was. He finally told her it was me, and she got like playfully indignant, and she's like, well, why didn't you start with that? Consider it done. I'm going to sign the paperwork, figure out what her title is going to be and what her work duties will be so that we can put it on the legal paperwork and get it done. As the president of Foursquare Mexico, that's not some small person. So God took this nothing, this nobody who there's no place for on the mission field. And the president of Foursquare Mexico says, I want her. I want her. But after 35 long years, I can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. I can finally see how God's hands have been in all this, the ups and the downs, the pain, the process. My prayer this evening is that you will find encouragement through my story and stand strong in your own season of waiting. Be encouraged that even when it seems hopeless, as though God's forgotten His promise to you, He's still working. Don't beat yourself up for feeling hopeless. I learned in this, of course I didn't write it down, I learned when I was reading for this and studying for this, there's a difference between faith and hope. Your hope is in things. Your hope is in events. Your faith is in Jesus. So it doesn't matter if you go through a season where you lose your hope for a minute, as long as your faith remains on the cross, as long as your faith is on Jesus. So I want you guys to stay strong. Those of you who are waiting, stand firm. Keep bringing it back to Him every time and time again. It's okay to wonder sometimes if you heard wrong. Ask him to remind you. Don't give up. Remember, every open door, whatever your promise is, walk through every open door. You put yourself in that world, you keep in those circles, and you walk through every open door. His perfect timing. You're going to see that tiny pinpoint of light at the end of the tunnel for yourself, too.